go. Probably need to knock off the power. All right, hopefully this is going to be, I don't know who hopes it more, huh? I'm intending to finish up Galatians this morning, so we're going to begin chapter 6. And I'm going to continue using this because I have my notes on here as well, so please just bear with me on that. He begins a... Oh man, there ain't nothing working for me this morning. Where did they... Oh, here it is. Beginning in chapter 6, we're looking at miscellaneous admonitions that Paul has for the Galatians as he starts wrapping up his thoughts for them. And he begins with a conversation about bearing one another in weakness. Beginning in verse 1, Brethren, even if anyone is caught in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself, so that you too will not be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and therefore fulfill the law of Christ. I wanted to look at a moment this concept of restoring such a one in a spirit of gentleness. If a brother falls away, how do we respond to that if we see sin occurring there? This is in the context of living by the Spirit and walking by the Spirit, carrying out the deeds of the Spirit, not walking in the flesh. Verse 26 of chapter 5 said, Let us not become boastful, challenging one another and envying one another. So, if somebody does seem to be in a situation where challenge or envy might be occurring, what do you do? 6:1, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. So what does a spirit of gentleness look like? Within the context of what we're dealing with here only, I wanted to point out that the spirit of gentleness will involve at least three things that I am certain of from this section here. The first one is it will involve a certain behavior. Okay, what does the gentleness look like? It's a certain behavior, and that will be, from this section, I would suggest the fruits of the Spirit. If you continue performing the fruits of the Spirit when trying to deal with somebody who has fallen away, you have exhibited a spirit of gentleness. Verse 23 of chapter 5 lists one of the fruit of the Spirit as gentleness, combined with self-control, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. Okay, if you have continued to show that behavior while you are trying to restore someone, I believe that you have fulfilled the purpose of chapter 6, verse 1. You also have a certain purpose. You are not supposed to, what do I say here? You're not supposed to behave with pride or the hope to create a stumbling block. You're supposed to look to yourself, 6 verse 1. Again, towards the end there. Each one looking to yourself so that you too will not be tempted. In other words, if you have recognition of the fact that you are capable of falling into sin, you are responding to a person who has sinned with a spirit of gentleness. Look, you're in this situation. It's not I'm so much better than you, so this has happened. We are all in a vulnerable situation. We all need to do our best to try to make sure we do not sin, and I'm here to help you. So, certain behavior and a certain purpose. I'm trying to help you. I'm not trying to show you that I'm better. And then with a particular attitude, as is evidenced again by 6:1 and the caution there shown towards sin when we recognize our own weakness. There's humility associated with this. Okay, not only is it an academic thing, it's a way we portray ourselves. Look, this sin thing is a problem. So the attitude needs to be one of I'm coming to you with humility, recognizing that we are all sinners, that kind of thing. So, with the fruits of the Spirit, with the purpose of trying to restore the person, with recognition of the fact that we can fall away too. Those are three things I got in terms of what the spirit of gentleness will look like from the context here that we've been studying in Galatians. Any comments you want to add to that? There's more, but I wasn't getting it from here. I wanted to stick to this. We need to be vigilant to sin, as I've said a couple times now. Verse 1 of chapter 6 at the end there. Each one looking to yourself so that you too will not be tempted. Sin is around us. Sin will come from within. Wolves in sheep's clothing, etc. Be vigilant to sin. And we need to fulfill the law of Christ as we bear one another's burdens. In verse 2, bear one another's burdens, therefore fulfill the law of Christ. Matthew 22:40. This is the one I cannot remember off the top of my head. Isn't that terrible? I've got one from James as well. Matthew 22. I'll know it as soon as I see it. Matthew 22:39, 37. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That is the greatest and foremost commandment. And the second is like, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. And this bearing one another's burdens is a part of the loving your neighbor concept. Yes, it's specific to people within the church rather than the world in general. If you look at the Good Samaritan, you'll see a different illustration being made there. But then in James 1, this is just a verse about the true religion being pure and undefiled religion, visit widows and orphans. Okay, so what do we do to fulfill the law of Christ? We bear one another's burdens. We love our neighbor. We love God. Right? These things are not necessarily different, as I was mentioning last week, than what the law of Moses trained us to do, trained people under it to do. Let's pick up in verse 3. If anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. And I believe this is in the context of the concern that he is mentioning in chapter 6, verse 1. I'm not doing anything to cause that. It's me. It's just me, huh?
It just happens sometimes.
We've got all sorts of electronic issues taking place today. So 6:1, look, if you're trying to help somebody work through sin, you need to be careful you don't fall into sin yourself. 5:26, if you're working with somebody, don't start challenging them, don't become boastful, don't think of yourself better than you should in verse 3 of chapter 6. If anyone thinks he's something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. So keep in mind that obedience does not merit self-righteousness. That's what I'm getting from this. Just because you're doing what you're supposed to do doesn't mean that you have some reason to boast. If you look in Luke, there's a great illustration of this in chapter 17. Verse 7, which of you, having a slave plowing or tending sheep, will say to him when he is coming from the field, come immediately and sit down to eat? But will he not say to him, prepare for me to eat, and properly clothe yourself and serve me while I eat and drink, and afterward you may eat and drink? He does not thank the slave because he did the things which were commanded, does he? So you too, when you do the things which are commanded you, say, we are unworthy slaves, we have done only what we ought to have done. And this is kind of what he's pointing out, I believe, as we look at chapter 6, verse 3 of Galatians. For if anyone thinks he's something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Yes, you've done what you're supposed to. Yes, you're not the one being caught in a trespass here. But all you've done is what you're supposed to do. That's what's expected of you. So there's no brownie points associated with this. Did you have something, Gary?
Yeah, this section kind of reminds me of Matthew 7, verse 1.
Mm.
Judge not, do not be judged.
Right.
For what judge you judge, you will be judged. The same measure you use, it will be back to you. I may be caught in a sin, and if someone comes to you with higher than thou art attitude, be careful. You may be in that situation.
The comparing each other by each other problem.
Yeah, be careful.
Right.
Sin is out there.
Verse 4, but, so, if someone thinks he's something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. The end of chapter 5, this is how you should behave. Beginning of chapter 6, but just because you're behaving this way doesn't mean you're better of your own merit, or that you deserve something extra because you've only done what you're supposed to do, because this is how you're supposed to behave. So, don't deceive yourself into thinking you're something for doing what you're supposed to. Each one must examine his own work, and then he will have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone and not in regard to another. So, I solicit comments on what the second half of this verse means, because I came with a couple different things and I wasn't real happy with any of them. So I'm not going to necessarily confidently assert anything here. What I will say is this. The point that I believe that I can make confidently from this is that our reward comes from God, not from men. Okay, each one must examine his own work, and then we will have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone. Whatever you have done that is right, God knows. We see this from other verses, and this is consistent with the concept that your reward is in heaven. Okay, if you start comparing yourself by somebody else, and not in regard to one another, is how the verse ends. I know from other places that bad things start happening when you do that. However, I don't know what it is. I just don't know what it is. Maybe it's... But at the same time, I look at verse 4, and it almost feels like he's saying, well, you can boast in yourself as long as nobody else knows about it, which also seems, Gary, Dad, help me out.
It's okay to be happy with good work.
Yep.
Keep it to yourself.
Right.
Nobody else wants to hear it.
Left hand, right hand
Yeah.
thing, yeah.
Test your work against God's work.
Mm-hmm.
If you've done what God has said, you can rejoice in that. But as John just said,
Right.
don't tell the world. Keep it yourself.
I guess perhaps I was getting hung up on the word boast there,
Yeah.
a little bit.
There's the verse of, if you do something to be seen by men,
Right.
you receive your
You
reward.
received your reward, yeah.
Right.
In fact, hang on a second, because I might have one of those listed here. No, 1 Corinthians 10:12 though. Therefore let him who thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. And then Matthew 6. This is where it is, Dad. Beware of practicing your righteousness before men for the purpose of being noticed by them. Otherwise you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. So when you give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and in the streets.
It's kind of illustration of the Pharisee and lecture. Go to the temple and pray.
Right.
Pharisee says,
I'm so humble.
yeah.
Look at how humble I am.
And that's kind of an illustration.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Where are we up to? Verse 4, each one must examine his own work. For each will bear his own load. So, verse 5, for each will bear his own load, is a point about accountability. Okay, I'm accountable for my behavior, my actions, and what I'm able to accomplish. Nobody else is accountable for that. Lee?
I just want to back up to 4.
Sure, go ahead.
Real quick.
I've not left 4 yet, so good.
You're not done with 4 yet?
No, keep going.
Okay. Okay. So, yes, to everything John and Gary and you have been saying, that we can, and 1 John 3 says we can have confidence before God. And we can, and we have to be careful about how the word boasting is, but as he's using the word here, we can boast that, yes, we have done what God has asked us to do. Now, that still doesn't mean that we don't have temptations. And I'm not tempted in robbing anybody, actually. Not right now. But maybe somebody in here is. And so while I'm patting myself on the back saying, wow, I haven't robbed anybody in a month, somebody who is caught in this sin, I can't say, I haven't done it, so obviously it ought to be easy for you not to do it. And so I've gone from comparing what I've done to the Word of God to comparing my successes with their failures. And we have to realize that we all have things we stumble.
Right.
And so when I'm successful, that's good, that's great as far as it goes. But that doesn't mean everybody is going to have the same ease at being successful in whatever you find easy.
Our scope of context is not great enough to be able to incorporate
Right.
all these things at the same time for us to decide who's better, right? And that'd be bad, one way or the other. In the context of verse 4, verse 5, each one will bear his own load. As I was saying, I believe this is a point to be made about accountability. First, that each, obviously, is responsible for his own behavior, but also that we are accountable to God, not to each other in this way. We did not, George did not create the law, and all of you are accountable to me. So in this conversation about you've done a good work, who do you tell? George isn't the one that needs to know, because George is the one who's not the one who's supposed to be keeping tabs. George is responsible for himself, not everyone else in that sense. So it kind of goes both ways. I'm focused on me because it's not my job to be focused on you, your good works in the sense, what you have been able to accomplish, what you could boast of. So if I am doing good things and then coming to you all with my convert was this big, or or whatever it might be, then I've not accomplished my purpose. That is something that God set out there for me to do, and I can say, God, I have accomplished this for you, and be pleased by that, or whatever. Jonathan.
So potentially difficult question, or maybe just I won't be able to ask it well, so feel free to brush off this little section, sort of 2 and then 3 and then 4 with 5. He says one thing and then he says 4. So like because of that, this other thing is the case.
Mm-hmm.
2, bear one another's burden, so fulfill the law of Christ. 5, each will have to bear his own load, kind of bear his own burden. So I agree with what you say about 5. It's about personal accountability. I'm accountable for my own actions, but I am also in 2 accountable to help other people with their own actions.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
somehow, so it changes a little bit because the 4 the second time is the bearing your own load, and the first time it's sort of the predicate statement or whatever that is, and then if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. So if that was standalone, I would think, okay, well everybody's nothing, so just don't think you're something. But then he goes on to say, I'm going to mess with that in a second. He goes on to say that boast in yourself. So is it that I don't even know. It says A and then B and then a slight bit on B and then a slight bit on A again, and somehow they're.
Let me,
no idea.
before we get through all of this section, which kind of ends in 10, I'm going to try to thresh out the differences between some of these things in a window that's going to pop up in a moment. So let me see if that helps, but let me keep on reading. In verse 7, do not be deceived. I'm skipping verse 6 on purpose for the moment. I don't like that verse. No, we'll get to it in a minute. But I want to make a couple points beyond that, and then we'll come back to 6 on its own. But verse 7, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. For the one who sows to his flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. Do not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. He doesn't say anything here new. He's encapsulating the idea that he's been elaborating on through the previous chapters. Do not behave in the fleshly manner. Are people rewarded for behaving in a fleshly manner? Absolutely. But it's not a reward that we should be content with or happy with or desire. If you behave in a spiritual manner, you will reap a spiritual reward, which is far better. To try to answer Jonathan's question, if we look at this section minus verse 6, just again for a moment, as a whole, and this is the one section I wish I could say that I had. He talks about sharing in this section, and he talks about not sharing in this section. There's things that belong to me, and there's things that belong to you, and there's some things that are in between in the relationship. So I had up here on my board a big beautiful thing that showed that the references to personal responsibility and the references to mutual responsibility just in this section only. I'm going to read some of it to you. There's sharing, there's not sharing. He talks about personal responsibility. The phrases in this section between verses 1 and 10, 9, somewhere in there, we have the phrase, look to yourself, looking to himself, your own work, himself alone, his own load, what he sows, and his own flesh. Okay? Those are all one specific person and the things he's supposed to be doing for himself. Those are in there in that order as you're glancing through. Look to himself, his own work, himself alone, his own load, what he sows, and his own flesh. That's 6, I guess. Okay? But then there's completely staggered in between is mutual responsibility, or things you're supposed to do for the other person. I said mutual responsibility. That's mutual responsibility. We both have this responsibility. This is more like a between us thing. But anyway, restore the other. Bear one another. Share. Do good to those. That would be somebody other than you. Of those of the household of faith, actually, as it continues there. So, back to Matthew 22. When it comes to understanding why you specifically, and then your fellow brethren, and then you specifically, and then your fellow brother, and then you specifically, he's saying all these things back and forth in this one section. Again, Matthew 22:37, what are the greatest commands of the law of Moses? Love God, and the second one is like it. Love your neighbor. Right? Now, loving God, is it your responsibility? Are you responsible for your neighbor's love for God? In the sense of conversion, yes. But long term, No, you are supposed to educate them, and after that, it's their responsibility, right? So, loving God is a personal responsibility that you have that is of your own thing. Loving your neighbor is still yours, and it deals with how you behave towards your neighbor. Those two things. And I think here Paul is just simply bouncing back and forth as he's trying to thresh out responsibilities. People were, I mean, obviously as we've gone through this, the Galatians had a poor understanding of what the law accomplished, both the old law and the new law. Why was this the case? Because Judaizing teachers were coming in and teaching them something that was not true. To be able to do that, what do the Judaizing teachers have to claim about themselves to affect this? Okay? That they have the knowledge and the authority to do this. This is what Paul addresses in chapter 1 and 2. And so while he didn't necessarily get there until now in this, we have an underlying problem that is, what is the responsibility of the people in the church? Do nothing more, do nothing less. Okay? Here's where he's hitting that. Look, you have no responsibility to these people that are asking more of you. We covered that in chapter 5. A little bit at the end of chapter 4 as well. Okay? I called it special clubism. Look, they're trying to gain you as followers for no other reason than the fact that they like to have you on their side, kind of that idea. They are trying to inflict some sort of authority over you that they do not have. Why do they not have it? Because your relationship with God is between you and God. Okay? So in the meantime, what does an appropriate interaction look like between the members of the group? And some are trying to lord it over others or whatever's going on there. Look, be good to them, show them good behavior. 6 verse 9, let us not weary in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. So then while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. And yes, the weary could be very general, don't get tired of doing good, but it also could be, look, these people are behaving outside of the realm of their authority and their responsibility, but that doesn't mean you have the right to stop doing good for them, because this is the way we're supposed to behave with each other. That's that response. So they're confused about what is it that I'm supposed to be doing, and why are these people doing something they're not supposed to be? And so he's addressing both of these things at the same time in these 10 verses. And so it's confusing, because he keeps on pinging. You're supposed to do this, don't do this for your brethren, do this for God, worry about yourself, but yes, there's sin happening, so take care of that. And he's just trying to split it up a little bit. And Jonathan, does that help at all? Maybe. Any additional comments to what I'm saying there, or disagreement, or question? I hope that was somewhat clear. Again, Matthew 22:37, if you look at the greatest commandments, 37 through 40, and then you read this short section here, 6:1 through 10, it fits. It goes really well together in understanding what our purpose for each other and for ourselves in our relationship with God is supposed to be. Let's back up to verse 6 for just a moment. The one who is taught the word is to share all good things with the one who taught him. Another time I wish you could see this. I say up here, support your local sheriff, and then cross out sheriff and write preacher. And this would be my suggestion, that this verse is addressing the sort of thing that 1 Corinthians 9 does. 10 and 11. Yes, for our sake it was written, because the plowman ought to plow in hope, and the thresher ought to thresh in hope of sharing the crop. If we sow spiritual things in you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? Paul usually hints to this, one way or another, sort of vaguely, depending, about this concept that an evangelist is worth being paid. And I think this is where he takes that opportunity. Man, y'all are a lively crowd tonight, this morning. Mike, go ahead.
My problem, and maybe some of your others, I want to see results right now.
Mm.
If you're going off somewhere and I talk to someone, I've got to be patient. Why can't you see it?
You're getting I agree that there's a problem in terms of the Bible talks about being careful to be in the teaching and preaching sort of role, but at the same time, congregations could be in danger of having a double standard. In other words, yes, we're going to pay you, preacher, to go off and try to accomplish this work, and we want to see some sort of immediate result. I'm not even sure how we would quantify that, but we want to see you do this stuff, and so maybe a year later it comes back and show us what our money has done, and have we been checking up on our own responsibilities at the same time? Because if we're expecting more from him we had the funds to begin with, and we could have been using them for good works, and I've given it to somebody else to do those good works, and believe me, I suspect they're getting done, right? But then here we are criticizing that person for having not accomplished something that we haven't accomplished either, or at least in our eyes or perspective it looks that way. That could be an unfortunate situation for an evangelist to find himself in, Gary.
That's a 1 Corinthians 3.
Right,
Who gives the increase here?
right. God.
Was it Paul? Apollos? No. They just did what God told them to
Right.
do. You plant water, and water.
Yeah.
I'll take care of the rest.
Fire Noah. Fire Noah.
Fire no one.
Noah.
Noah.
Fire
The
Noah.
guy in the Old Testament who preached for 120 years.
Oh, right. Well, I was about to say Jesus didn't convert everyone, right? I mean, unfortunately, I'm not saying that was Jesus' fault. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point. It was not Jesus' fault.
It wasn't Noah's fault either.
Right, it wasn't Noah's fault either. Let's move on to verse 9, 10, 11-ish. 9 again. Do not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. Why could we weary? Why could we weary? Because how is we've talked about walking in the Spirit. That was the end of chapter 5. The walking in the Spirit is described in other places as a race. It is described as the narrow path, right? This is the more difficult one. It's the less dangerous one. That's the word I'm looking for there. That's almost ironic, I guess, that it's the less dangerous one, but it's also the more difficult one. So it's a long-term thing, and it takes a lot of effort, and the danger exists of growing weary. Giving up is possible. Do not grow weary. Well, if it's possible for them to grow weary, once saved, always saved. If you're once saved, always saved, why would he be telling them to not grow weary? What would the danger be of growing weary? Go ahead, grow weary. What difference does it make? You're saved now. That doesn't fit. Just doesn't fit at all. And then notice in verse 10, that is, so then while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially those who are of the household of faith. Within the overall context of the letter, God's justification, how he accomplishes that, I think one of the points that can be made from this verse is to recognize that God's promise in that sense motivates us to constant goodness, right? We know that we have received this. We know that the opportunity now exists for us to doing good. The opportunities will be presented to us. That is our responsibility. So just keep doing them. Don't stop. Keep it in your mind what your relationship with God is, and that will solicit within you a reaction that shows goodness to your brethren. I'm going to keep going. Not having the board up there makes me go faster. Go ahead, Lee.
In the context of verse 9, let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary, as you pointed out several times, is also in the context of dealing with one another.
Yes.
Dealing with brethren, and specifically here, ones who are, verse 1, caught in a trespass. You who are spiritual, restore such a one. And so you've got brethren who are caught in a trespass, don't grow weary. You've got brethren who aren't caught in a trespass, but aren't exactly like each other. And we come to have differences of opinions and different, I do this way and you do it that way. And we go home and we rave. Well, don't lose heart. Because in due time we will reap if we have not grown weary.
Right.
There's a tendency to want to go to the next congregation down the road. Oh, I run into a problem here. I'm just going to go to the next congregation down the road. Thankfully, we don't have that option here.
Well, I didn't know how to ask this nicely, but one of the things that was occurring to me is have situations arisen where we might be tempted to do so if an alternative existed?
Some of us would be.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Yeah.
all of us.
Right.
Maybe all of us.
That would be unfortunate. I had a question about verse 10. Focusing on the word opportunity here for a moment. So then while we have opportunity, is the apostle saying when the situation arises, take advantage of it? Or is he talking about something more long-term? We're alive right now and we won't be later? He's talking about the end goal some here, right? In due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. So is this, while we have opportunity, is he talking about a national situation? Times are good now, they're not going to be good in a couple of years. we're going to be limited in our ability to reach out. What's this opportunity?
I take it as the present.
Okay.
Present opportunity.
Okay, so when an opportunity presents itself, take it. Be glad it's there, take it. No more than that, there's no...
You know,
Okay.
Sufficient for today is its own.
Yeah.
Let God work on it. He puts an opportunity for you.
And at face value, I think it's very easy to see that there. I was curious if I was missing something by reading it that way.
He applies this whole section to giving, sharing. You know, I mean, yes, broader applications to give, to help. You know, an opportunity to give. I mean, think of the Matthew 25. You know, gave a couple full water, he placed it, he did all these things. James 1:27. For God is to visit those, help
Right.
those who are in need.
Right. Get it done while you
Over and
can.
over and
Get it
over
done.
and over and over.
When the opportunity presents itself, get it done. Verse 11. See with what large letters I am writing to you with my own hand. Now I was going to crack a joke here. If you take out the word with, see what large letters I'm writing to you with my own hand. Yet, Paul, we know you like large letters, right? He writes the big ones. This is one of the short ones. And there is a point to be made there about how the meaning of a sentence can change if you just take out one word. And here, it's a fairly harmless example to point it out here. So, are we prepared to have a 2-week conversation about the nature of Paul's illness? Is this where we start this? Thorn in the flesh. Does he have weak eyes? Is he blind? Weak nerves? He's shaky, so he's signing his name at the end. All these conversations happen. Whatever is going on here, his point is, I am the one writing the letter to you. He started in chapter 1. I've hammered this again and again and again. Curses to anyone who says anything other than the truth. I received the truth from God directly, not from any other man. And so here he's wrapping this up, whether he's blind or shaky or whatever his is going on here with his large letters and why he's writing with large letters. Okay? Paul, this is me. I'm Paul and I'm writing this to you. That's his point. I can't conclude anything more than that from there. Go ahead.
This is Paul. I love you. I want you to say
Right.
don't turn from the truth.
Right.
It pained me greatly to write this letter, but I did. I love you.
Mm-hmm. And there was some sort of illustration he was able to make, or at least they knew something about him that we do not, in terms of, this is me specifically writing this. You can see how big my letters are. So be encouraged because I haven't grown weary. I don't know what that thing was. Okay. Verse 12, those who desire to make a good showing in the flesh try to compel you to be circumcised simply so that they will not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. For those who are circumcised do not even keep the law themselves, but they desire to have you circumcised so that they may boast in your flesh. This is what I was talking about a moment ago. This came up in chapter 3 and 4 a little bit. Look, why are these people anxious to make this happen? Okay, and it is not your responsibility to prove to them your good deeds or the fact that you're being obedient in some way. That is between you and God in that sense. But may it never be that I would boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus, through which the world has been crucified to me, and I to the world. For neither is circumcision anything nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. And those who will walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God. So there are hypocrites out there that seek to bolster their pride at your expense, a fleshly pursuit with fleshly results. That's in 12 and 13 there. If you look at 1 Corinthians 3 really quickly. Oh, yeah. From when one says, I am of Paul, and another, I am of Apollos, are you not mere men? Okay, so these men are claiming, do this thing, and now you've done them, and now you can prove to them that you have done this thing, and what has that gotten you? Nothing. I mean, whatever it's gotten you, you've got it now. So you tell me. What has this accomplished for you? It's a fleshly pursuit with fleshly results. In fact, if you look back up in verse 8, the one who sows to his flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. So he's applying this principle that he has in verse 8 down here. These people are telling you to do these things. Sure, you can do them, and what is your reward for that? Corruption. It doesn't save you. In contrast, Paul does not boast in them or in circumcision, but in Christ. Look, Paul is saying, even if you do what you are supposed to be doing, I'm not going around saying, oh, look, I've got those Galatians on my side now. They're following me. Rather, thank God they have chosen to be obedient. Let us rejoice in the fact that this has occurred. When somebody's baptized, we always get the email, rejoice with us. I mean, that's almost always what it says, without exception, And it's good. That's fine. That's a perfectly good thing. It's nice to know before you open it what's going on there. I just think it's interesting that we so universally recognize that is the response. It's a great thing to see that happen and to see consistency and recognition of what's taking place there. So, I'm not boasting because you'd be following me. It's not about me. These men are making it about them. Don't do that. Don't follow them. Don't follow me. Follow Christ. Paul was crucified to the world through Christ's crucifixion. Where do we look to understand that relationship? We've talked about it again and again and again. It's probably come up Romans 6. Romans 6. How are you resurrected? And then in verse 15, for neither is circumcision anything nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. Well, great, Paul. You could have put that in chapter 2 and skipped it. But I mean, he's finishing up. Last couple of verses here. What's the point? What have I said over and over and over again? I'm going to tell you what I'm going to say. I'm going to say it. Now I'm telling you what I said. Not only that, he told them what he was going to say and how, it was
way back to chapter 1,
right.
6 through 9 there, yeah.
So, lest you forget it by the time you've read this and your brains are clouded and we've been sitting here, reading this for 2 hours or whatever's going on, the last word I want you to remember, circumcision does not matter. There's a new creation. Okay, now just leave it there. And then he wraps it up. The law of Moses is no longer in effect, rather a new creation. Go to 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creature. The old things have passed away. Behold, new things have come. And then John 3:3, the conversation with Nicodemus. Truly I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. A new creation occurs here, regeneration, spiritual regeneration. Neither is circumcision anything nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. So, that's the rule. And what is there for those who walk by this rule? Peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God. Peace and mercy, specifically, those were fruits of the Spirit, right? If they are following this rule, they're going to be exhibiting these things when they have set aside the fleshly mindset. So, the law of Moses, the law of Christ is not unlike the old in terms of the influence and behavior. Train you in these ways, you are going to behave in this sense. You're going to practice love towards your neighbor. The Matthew 22:37. These are the greatest commands, that you behave in these ways towards God and towards your fellow man. But ultimately, the law of Christ was different in its purpose. That is, it justified rather than bookmarked people to hold them until Christ's coming. Verse 17, from now on let no one cause trouble for me, for I bear on my body the brand marks of Jesus. So I think he's saying here, we've discussed this now, Galatians, you and I, we've had this conversation, let's not have to deal with this again. Does anybody get something else from that? Let no one cause trouble for me. I mean, he could be, if you weren't to get that out of that, you could go all sorts of places with this. What else is going on? In that one verse, you could start imagining all sorts of things. But the context has been, what justifies you, circumcision, the law of Moses. Okay, from now on, let no one else cause trouble. Look, I just wrote you a big long letter about this. Let this be enough. Don't let me have to do what I'm going to have to do with the Corinthians. Jonathan?
In 12, the people are saying don't follow them. The reason that the people that they shouldn't follow are doing what they're doing is only in order that they may not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. So these people are, they kind of, want to feel religious and they can't deny that it's the truth, but, they don't really want to suffer for it. So he says a little bit more, and then he says, I'm suffering for it.
I appreciate you mentioning this because I completely skipped over a point that I wanted to make in 11, 12, and 13. those who desire to make a good showing in the flesh try to compel you to be circumcised simply so that they will not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. So let's begin. I want to begin with my point by pointing out the word simply here. Okay? They have a very base and shallow purpose in the way they are going about manipulating you. Why are they wanting to do this? It's simply, it's not complicated, Galatians. Pay attention for a moment here. They don't want to do the right thing. How do you soothe a conscience who is unwilling to do the right thing? You get everybody, dragging down. This is what's going on here. Look, you're doing the right thing, I'm doing the wrong thing. I don't like that. I don't want to have to change. That will take effort. I don't want to be persecuted for the cross of Christ. So you do what I'm doing, and then I can feel better about myself. Surround myself with people who are also doing the wrong thing. Do we not experience this all the time? In far less noble or academic senses. This is why the bad company corrupts good morals things happen. Because bad company is out there, and they are not okay being bad company around good company. Their company must be bad with them. That is the purpose that is accomplished here. Now, in this sense, we are dealing with both explicit sin, but then just a weakness. It was far more difficult to be a Christian when Paul is writing this letter than it is right now, physically speaking. Okay, a lot of stuff out there that's wanting to see you dead, particularly as time goes on. They're going to experience these things. And so people, perhaps initially, wanted to do the right thing, came from a Jewish background, converted, understood or whatever, and that heat was pretty strong. That weakness is there. Whatever might be occurring, whoever it might be coming from, the idea here is that the reason that they are trying to push these things again is because they aren't strong enough to bear with the truth. Hence the
made the
behavior
point
issues.
here that they are nullifying the cross of Christ,
Right.
Because they're making Christianity just a sect of Judaism,
Right.
and then they would not be persecuted by the Jews
As
anymore.
well as the Romans saw it, in particular. This is just, they come, they go, these crazy Jews. What did Rome know about the Jews? They do not have their act together religiously.
They're fighting and quarreling amongst each other.
We have no king but Caesar. That just hurts. And then they'll say that in one breath, and in the next breath, they're fighting with Christ and the apostles over the issue of who's their leader. We have no father but Moses. Don't they say that too at one point? It's just, boy, that hurts. There's some serious burn there. I apologize for chopping this up, going back up to 11, 12, and 13. Any other comments from 11, 12, and 13, or somewhere else? Lee, go ahead. Somewhere else.
Yeah, we're supposed to be patient when helping people who are caught in trespass, correct?
Yes.
Gentle, correct?
Yes.
Verse 17, from now on, let no one cause me trouble. How do you reconcile that? That seemingly sounds neither patient nor gentle. And he is trying to help people who are they may not even be caught up in trespass. Mm-hmm. They're being tempted with being caught up in trespass, although some of them probably have sinned. How do you reconcile his firmness, that statement, from now on let no one cause me trouble, with being gentle and patient?
You asked me, do you have to be gentle, do you have to be patient? Yes, you do. So I guess I would suggest this. If you're being gentle and patient with somebody, and if that is going to have any effect on them whatsoever, there has to be a part of them somewhere that is willing to listen. Correct?
Uh-huh.
And if there is a part of them that is willing to listen, there's a part of them that is going to have to hear some unfortunate realities. Somewhere along the line. Something I would point out about verse 17, it is the next to last sentence in this letter. And so when it comes to being patient and appealing to them in the best nature possible, he has made a significant effort here. An inspired effort, at the very least. And that's everything. And so if that patience and goodness and kindness is going to have any effect on them whatsoever, it is because there's at least a small part of them that can accept that. And if it can accept that, it has to accept the reality of the situation. And addressing a reality must be done, right? You have to address the facts if you're going to teach somebody the truth. So, what is he acknowledging in verse 17? This is trouble. This is trouble. I've talked about it. I've been nice. I've been patient. And, one verse at the very end of this dialogue is hardly harsh. But if you are going to claim it was, he has to recognize to them that this is an issue that causes a problem. And the problem needs to be addressed. And he has done everything he can to solicit goodwill back and shown patience to them so they can recognize that behavior, respond with that behavior, be calm as they get to hear, this is trouble. What are you going to do about it? When I was talking to a woman the other day that John and I have been struggling with recently. We had some paperwork that needed to be filed with the state, and this lady just seemed like she was not willing to, it was going to take a week and a half. It's been 3 months now. Okay? Last time I talked to her on the phone, she was pretty vicious. So I stopped by the office the other day, and I stepped up to her really good. That's what I did. I was honest with her. Look, I know you don't like me right now. I mean, I said these words. I know you don't like me right now. I know you don't want to see me in here. We don't understand what's going on. You know more about the situation than we do. We need this problem solved, and we're afraid that it's sitting on the bottom of the stack just because we have done something to offend you. What do I need to do to change that? And she mellowed right now. Still don't have the paperwork. We'll see. But, Paul goes through. He loves these people, and he says so. Okay? And he shows them how he loves them, and he shows them where the truth is coming from. And to come down here to the end and say, let no one cause trouble for me, leave. If you were truly meaning, if somebody was going to make the argument, this is irreconcilable because he's not being gentle here, you have to throw out his behavior through the entire rest of the book.
I would suggest that he is being gentle and patient. And that are actually, now this might be on there are degrees of gentle and patience.
It's certainly stern. It's drawing a line. This has been trouble. Something needs to be done.
Right, and this statement, he didn't just throw out in this verse, being gentle. It's not like up and through verse 16, he's been gentle and patient, and now he's not being gentle and patient. My point is, this kind of language, this firm, it needs to stop now, this is trouble, that kind of direct, very forceful language is included in being patient and gentle.
And look at the things, he's not making fun of them. He's not ridiculing them. He's not lording it over them, outside of, he's an inspired apostle, so there's things that he says that I would not say to anyone, or at least the manner he might take, perhaps. I agree with you. How about that? Jonathan, and then, or Dad, and then Jonathan, sorry.
I want to hear what John.
Okay, Jonathan, go ahead.
I was going to say, he's also referred to them as fools.
You foolish Galatians.
An exclamation point.
Yeah.
But he calls them fools. At least those people, even if like the entire group of people or whatever wasn't actively doing the wrong thing, the people he calls fools, I think it's probably pretty safe to say, were sinning in their turning back to the old things. So he, and that's in the middle. Imagine how just the entire tone of the book would be different if he says, "You foolish Galatians," and then the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirit, brothers, amen.
Right.
That's not a good way to end.
Right.
At all. And the beginning of 3 there, "O foolish Galatians," that's also included in being gentle and whatever. We have to assume it is because he says it. But he says that pretty much right in the middle and kind of works his way back to, "I'm your friend, I'm being your teacher," towards the end, and then just, I think, a little bit of a kickback to that, like you were saying, this is trouble, this is a very bad thing, and let's not go back there.
Verse 6 says, "Peace and mercy be upon those who practice the new law." Essentially, Dad.
When I think he's counseling that when someone is struggling with sin but still trying, there's a time for patience there. When someone is dragging some believers away, and that's what the Judaizing teachers were doing, his patience is going to run out. There's less room for patience in there when someone else's behavior is dragging someone away from the Lord. That's how I would reconcile.
Like Corinthians, when he says, "Look, I've written you 2 letters. Right? If you don't change, I'm coming. And you're not going to like me when I come."
Is there a problem of pretense when we are assembled? Does that ever occur, that people are pretending to be living in good behavior and they're not? I mean, that happens, that happens. So is it better that we let that continue, or that it be addressed? It can be addressed. It has to be addressed. It can be addressed with patience, and it can be addressed with firmness at the same time, without forsaking love.
And he talked about that when he talked about leaven.
Mm-hmm.
In his letter.
Get rid of the leaven, yeah.
Yeah. You leave that leaven there, what happens?
I actually discovered the other day, for the first time in my adult life, I probably knew this when I was little, the effect that leaven actually has on bread. Like, it makes it rise, but I don't even think I knew what that meant, and I've never baked. And Janice had pizza dough sitting out, and I ate some right as she mixed it, and then 15 minutes later, I came back and ate a little more. It's like, whoa, it's all puffy now, and I had never paid attention to that. Like, oh, yeah. So yeah, it's a great illustration. Any comments on "For I bear on my body the brand marks of Jesus"?
That's like the leaven.
Yeah. I mean, it's a general statement about the work he's done and what he suffered for it in general. He's saying it kind of politely or whatever at the very end. I didn't get any more out of it than that he's just referring to it. And then his benediction, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirit, brethren. Amen. That's him saying goodbye. Anything else? It's time to stop. Let no one cause trouble for me now, and I'm done. Thank you all for being patient. We will break until 5 after at the very latest, or whenever the lights go off, and then begin our worship period.